Yeah, so there was an article put out by the Brett McMurphy of On Three, stating that the Big Ten and SEC basically demanded power for the playoff format, but couldn't come to a decision. So essentially, um, according to College Football Playoff Executive Director Rich Clark, and I quote, "This gives the management committee additional time to review the 12-team format so they can better assess the need for potential change. While they all agree that the current format has brought more excitement to college football and has given more schools a real shot in the postseason, another year of evaluation will be helpful." Now, now that I just read that for the very first time, that's exactly what I said the other night when we talked about, playoff format, the Notre Dame situation. They need more data points with the 12-team playoff to actually make a informed decision about whether to expand, you know, make it smaller, how we structure it. Do we give automatic buys for conference champions whatsoever? So, in the words of Brett McMurphy, he even put this in the article in the third paragraph. That reasoning, how can I put it, is bullshit. Look, you don't blame Rich Clark, you don't blame the playoff committee, you blame the Big Ten and the SEC. That's why they put it in the graphic. There is no other sources that can, completely derail the playoff in its entirety than these two conferences right here. You know, they are fully in this to make their pocketbooks larger, to get some more change in the bank account. And it's honestly a disgrace. It's honestly a disgrace. This is why I put out a tweet the other day of a preferred 12-team format in my eyes. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can find that on my Twitter feed, but it's disgusting. It's disgusting. We're bringing in lawsuits, lawyers, contract disputes, whole entire conferences made up of 16 and 18 teams respectively wanted to control the whole sport. At this point, let's make it the NFL and the CFL essentially. You two can go off, do your own thing. I'll still watch it because it'll still be high level football and it'll be the schools that we love to watch. But go off and do your own thing. If you really want to control and have a say in everything, and like that, if you couldn't tell, I'm at a loss for words because I have no idea. Every other conference in America plus Notre Dame agreed on an expanded format. Oh, but no, we gotta go through this whole debacle of let's dispute it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so as you can see, I mean, this was dropped in our laps literally minutes before we were going online tonight. And you could find like his proposed 12-team format on his Twitter. His Twitter is linked right below his name. LFTG Pod 01. That is his handle on Twitter. So if you want to go check that out, definitely go do so. Very quality funder, underrated follow, I should say. But enough of the glazing from that perspective. So to really dive into what's really going on here. So Reed kind of talked about it. Not just the Big Ten and the SEC wanted playoff expansion to begin with. It's the other leagues that make up the FBS level also wanted this playoff expansion. The Big 12 wanted expansion. The ACC wanted expansion. Every single conference in the group of five, plus Notre Dame, plus UConn, they all wanted expansion. They were all in agreement with that with the SEC and the Big Ten. However, the thing is, only two conferences could make proposals right now because what happened is the SEC and the Big Ten, they hold all the leverage in terms of what is the future of the format. The big caveat in all of this, so the SEC and the Big Ten are proposing two different things right now. The SEC is proposing a 5+11 format. You still have your five best conference champions. At least that's how it should be. I'm not going to dive into like the specifics of that, but then you're adding an extra 4 at-large spots. So that's what the SEC is proposing right now, and that's what all of these other leagues are in support of. They want the 5+11 format if we do go to expansion to 16 teams. Well, the Big Ten doesn't want that right now. The Big Ten, They want a 2014 playoff first and foremost, but it's not going to be your FCS playoff format that you see from our FCS brother and sisters, right? You see the Big Ten, how they want to do a 2014 playoff is they want to basically provide 16 auto bids that's divided between the 4 power conferences. And then you have an extra 2 auto bids for the best group of 6 champions plus 6 at large. So that's how the Big Ten wants to do it. None of the other conference commissioners are in support of that. But again, because the SEC and the Big Ten, they can't come to an agreement. That's the biggest reason why we don't have the expansion, even though all of these conference commissioners, plus Notre Dame, all agree that they want playoff expansion. And to your point as well, I absolutely agree with you, Reed, that we need more data points before any decision should be made. At least when we had the leap from 4 to 12 teams, what happened was we at least had roughly a decade of data points. And there was certainly some years where, even though it was a 14 playoff, there was certainly more than 4 teams out there that were absolutely capable of winning a national championship. So I understand playoff perspective expansion from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because you're automatically giving half the field a seat at the table. So your 5 highest ranked conference champs plus Notre Dame, if they're in the top 12, automatically get a spot, which we talked about previously. You can go check that out. It's hard when you're already giving half the field a spot at the table. I mean, we talked about it before, at least I did. If you're giving Notre Dame an automatic spot at the table, give them a schedule worthy of being a top 12 team. Because if you look at their 2026 schedule, they play 4 teams that had a winning record in 2025. That's not a playoff team. That's not a playoff team. So yes. in my eyes, this, I mean, I'm all for expansion, but at a certain point, like probably 16 is my cutoff. Because at this point, then what's the top 25 ranking? We're giving 3/4 of the top 25 a playoff spot. Like, that's why in my proposal, in my preferred format, you give what I say, like the top 18 teams, you take out the top 4 conference champs because you would assume that they're in the top 18, and then, do a wild card round and then go from there. So
yeah. So that's what you would assume. But then, I mean, Duke happened last year, this past year. So you truly never know in this sport, and that's why college football is so interesting. And really, to stay on the point of the format before we get into the rest of the show here tonight. So I know that another thing that the group of 6 commissioners didn't realize that they were agreeing to is that the top G6 team doesn't have to necessarily be a conference champion. It just has to be the highest ranked group of 6 team. Now, when I first heard that, I was awestruck. One, that the G6 commissioners didn't read the fine print, right? That is literally your job to either read that yourself or get lawyers to read that for you and advise you on that kind of stuff. But the more that I thought about it, I actually don't hate it as much as I thought I was going to hate it, because I like to go back to UConn for this. So the format that we had last year, UConn had almost no realistic path to get into the college football playoff. They couldn't get it in as a conference champion because they're not a part of the conference as of right now. And of course, getting in as an at-large was always going to be a tall task because they essentially play a G5 level schedule. So they were going to have to go undefeated just to have a shot. And even then, we saw how G5 teams were treated. Even at 12-0, UConn probably wouldn't be in the top 12, right? So now that I sit back and think about it, it opens up a path for UConn to now, hey, we don't have the ability to win our conference championship, but if we play well enough during the regular season, we now have a viable path. So at first, I thought, when I heard that aspect of it, I thought I was going to hate it. But now I sit back and thought about it. I actually don't hate it as much because it gives teams like UConn an opportunity to make the college football playoff if they have an excellent season.
Yeah, there's been scenarios in the past where teams win their conference and they're not as highly ranked as some other teams that are similar caliber. For instance, like in North Texas this past year, I'm pretty sure you included considered North Texas a pretty good G5 team, G6 team. They didn't end up winning their conference, but they were, considered one of those highly, ranked G6 teams. This opens the door for them. They could be 11-1 regular season, end up losing their conference championship, but still make it because, say, another Duke example, a team that wins the conference went 8-5, but they're not the best G16. So you open up the door for a UConn or another G6 team that potentially could not get the national recognition to be ranked, but is still considered a very good team because they go 11-1, 10-2 in the regular season, something like that, and just dominate all the way through. So I also don't hate it per se because again, we saw it with Duke this past season. You never know with these conference, title scenarios and tiebreakers who's going to make your conference title game. It could not be the best two teams per se in your conference. So yeah, I don't hate it per se. I would prefer it to be a conference champion because I think that just incentivizes you having to win your conference. But that's just me personally.